It's time for the Pittsburgh Sports Reporters, an inside look at your teams in your city.
It's Pittsburgh Sports Hub, and this is the Pittsburgh Sports Reporters. Tim Benz here with Mark Madden from 105.9 The X, Mike Prisuta from the DVE Morning Show. I'm also on the X, and we've got tons to talk about from this past weekend. Guys, we'll just start with the Steelers and go to town there. 0-3. I don't see it getting any better. I thought it was going to be 7-9 to start the year, and I feel like I overshot the moon by maybe 3 or 4 games based on what we've seen so far to this point in the season.
I think it's an utterly hopeless situation. When your most reliable player falls apart like Ben Roethlisberger did last night, things are not going in a good direction. But dare I say it, I hope they go 3-13 or 4-12 as opposed to rallying for like a 7-9 record. If you're going to not make the playoffs for a second straight year, at least get a good draft pick. And maybe 4-12 will finally make this team realize that it needs a complete overhaul. I don't think a tweak, I don't think a nip or a tuck, I don't think that helps at all. I think they need to, I don't know if clean house is the right word because that's tough to do under the cap, but I think a lot of change needs made. And I thought that was in evidence on the field last night.
I saw a tweet last night, Mike. Somebody said that Jadeveon Clowney has decided to come back for his senior year because he fears playing for the Steelers next year.
Yeah, they might have to pass on him anyway and draft an offensive tackle, Tim. I think the alarm bells truly went off for me when I saw Kelvin Beachum rotating in for Marcus Gilbert and Mike Adams.
It's like that game in Denver a few years ago.
And then listening to Marcus Gilbert after the game say, no, that wasn't a shot at us. I had a solid game. Mike had a solid game. We had a solid game up front. I'm hoping he doesn't actually believe that stuff, but I think last night was the time for Marcus Gilbert and Mike Adams to stand up and say, I'm embarrassed by this. We obviously haven't been getting it done. We need to do better. And, Mark, to your point, they've been trying to rebuild the offensive line. They're just not rebuilding it very well, apparently. And that is the bigger issue than 0-3 because
the offensive line is the single biggest issue with the team, no doubt.
If neither one of those tackles can play, and it's a little early to say that they're both busts, but the results are not encouraging when you're rotating a guy in. I've never seen that. That just floored me. And if that's the case, then it is an issue beyond this season, beyond 0-3. And that's going to be hard to overcome.
Yeah, and if you're going to rebuild an offensive line, it's not just going to be those 2 tackles. How healthy is Pouncey ever going to be? And did they get the wrong guy with DeCastro at one guard? And the other guard is Ramon Foster, who's nice to have. But, I mean, he should be the swing guy. He should be the 6th guy, not the starter at one guard position.
Foster shouldn't be your best offensive lineman. And right now, Ramon Foster is their best offensive lineman.
Maybe it's the center, but it's a good point. It's not one of the other 3 guys that they
if it's the center, they just picked him off the scrap heap. What does that say?
So he was somebody else's no better than 8th offensive lineman then, if that's the case. And that somebody was Tennessee who didn't make the playoffs last year.
And now the top running back's a guy they cut a couple weeks ago. This is absolutely grotesque mismanagement. Grotesque.
Well, the top running back's the guy who's going to play in London, Le'Veon Bell, but there's no depth.
Yeah, depth is gone from this team, and I'm not even so sure how good the starters are. And to that point, we're going to sit around, I'm sure, for the rest of this week and just rip on Roethlisberger and the offense because it's easy to do. Everybody likes to kill the offense, but you look at the takeaway giveaway margin, there's no takeaways, none. Yeah, they've given the ball away 9 times, but this defense, which had a chance to keep momentum last night if they could keep the Bears on the sidelines, get the Bears to the sidelines. They allow 3 huge third downs. They have no takeaways the whole season.
I know a lot of people are going to disagree with this, but Dick LeBeau's washed up. The game's passed them by. Look at the way the Bears played last night. They're trying to strip the ball on every play. They have cornerbacks jumping routes trying to get on the ball. The Steelers just lay back, lay back, lay back. Death of 1,000 cuts. The zone blitz isn't working anymore. I see zilch from Lamar Woodley. He has not come back as the player he was a couple years ago in my eyes. The defense didn't contribute as graphically to the loss as the offense and Ben Roethlisberger did last night, but the defense has to bear a lot of responsibility.
Oh, I think it should, especially after that one drive. Those 3 third downs were massive.
Well, and the one, to me, that stands out, if I had to take one play off of last night's game, and if you turn this around to the Steelers win the game, at 27-23, 3rd and 10, the first third down of that drive, Jay Cutler scrambles for 13 yards. You simply cannot allow that to happen, and that's not.
He didn't just scramble straight ahead. He went this way, then back across the field, then up and trucked to safety.
That's not getting a turnover. I mean, the Steelers had 3 turnovers at that point, and the Bears had none. And I'm here to tell you, if they stop Jay Cutler there and force a punt, they might win the game. Mm-hmm. It's rushing with a purpose. It's not going crazy. It's lane discipline. It's assignment discipline, executing so that Cutler does not have a lane. All you got to do is hold him to a 9-yard completion or less, and you're getting the ball back there, and they couldn't do it.
I see him winning in London, but I just deem that to be a temporary reprieve.
I think every game is going to be a challenge. I think they could lose any game. I think they could lose every game. They won't, because history dictates that most teams don't. I just hate the Steelers right now. I mean, I look at them, and this idiotic attempt to make them into the old-style Steelers team, they couldn't be further away from an old-style Steelers team, and that goes for attitude, too. Antonio Brown had a good game last night. He made a lot of great catches. I was infuriated, absolutely insanely infuriated, guys, when it's 17-0 Chicago, he catches that 45-yard pass along the sidelines, then runs to the stands and does a number from a Broadway musical. It's 17-0. Get back in the huddle and make another play, Busher.
You agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that. Now, I can say that after the game, Antonio Brown did not want to talk about his 2 touchdowns or his 196 receiving yards. He just talked about the dire straits that the Steelers are in and how they have to get out of that. What I'm seeing is a team that's played really poorly, and despite that, in all 3 games, 2, 3, 4 plays would have turned it around and won the game. And it's very similar to what we saw at the end of last year, the Cincinnati game, the Dallas game, even the San Diego game to a degree. What we're seeing, though, is that the Steelers consistently do not win these games. Their fatal flaw is they cannot perform in the fourth quarter or at the precise time where the game is in the balance. And that used to be Ben's forte. It used to be the defense's forte. I don't know if Ben Roethlisberger has slipped a little bit and he can no longer mask all of the failures, or if this just happens to be the worst offensive line they've had in recent memory. Rotating tackles leads me to believe it's a lot more of the latter, but it's probably a little of the former. Whatever it is, it just ain't good enough right now.
Ben has slipped. There's no doubt about that. But part of the problem is just, the personnel around him and the way he's used. When you get dumbed down constantly, you become dumb. When they ask you to be Mike Tomczak in the first quarter and Joe Montana in the fourth quarter, a lot of times something's going to get lost in the translation. That said, Ben cannot go blameless. Last night was an absolute horror show for him. But getting back to what Mike said about the Steelers can't get it done at the moment of truth, I thought a typical moment came early in the second half. They got the kickoff. They had some momentum coming out of halftime. I really thought at that point they could rally and win that game, and Felix Jones puts the ball on the carpet. I mean, it was the one thing that couldn't happen, and somehow you just knew it was going to happen.
Yeah, they're not getting beat like the Giants are getting beat. They're not getting beat like Jacksonville's getting beat. But they're getting beat, so really what's the difference?
You guys brought up the moment of truth. Is it now the moment of truth for the Pirates, their magic number, as we sit here right now, down to 2? What do you think about their prospects as they move forward? Is it all about just trying to get the home field advantage for the wild card? Do they hold out hope that St. Louis gags it away? Or where do you think they're looking right now as far as setting up their rotation leading towards the last part of this week?
Yeah, that's how I'd be looking at it, is that
for the one-game playoff.
You're playing in the one-game playoff, and whatever you got to do, and you're probably playing it on the road, whatever you got to do to set that up in the most advantageous fashion possible, do that. It's interesting that the Cardinals are playing the Nationals,
because that keeps the Nationals alive, or makes it longer before the Pirates can clinch.
Do you want the Nationals to win, or do you want the Cardinals to win, depending on how things fare in Chicago? The Pirates haven't done great the last couple of years against Jeff Samardzija. There are no guarantees on the road, even in Chicago, and then you got to go to Cincinnati again, where you're clearly having your problems. But I still think it's a gravy situation. They've had their winning season. They're going to make the playoffs, it looks like. I got a hard time bitching because they're not a division champion.
That's a good point. I mean, they're a mediocre baseball team right now. They're one game over 500 since July 1st, but they had a great season prior to that. And like Billy Beane said, the main goal is to get in the playoffs. After that, it's mostly luck. And I do agree with that. I just want the Pirates to have a home playoff game, whether it's the wild card game or in the divisional series, because I think that really validates in a visible way what's happened here this season. But I do think overall it's been a good season. I just really regret that they blew that game Friday against Cincinnati. They blew the game against San Diego not long prior. I really think Mark Melanson is incapable of handling this situation. I think Jordy Mercer showed that too. I'm not sure everybody on this team is ready for prime time. But overall, you can't complain. And even if you do, boy, given what's happened the last 20 years, what's the worst that could happen? It still won't be too bad.
Finally, guys, the news surrounding the Penguins not good when it comes to goaltending. Thomas Vokoun, blood clots in his right leg, had this issue before when he was in Nashville. Now he's going to be out for a while indefinitely, and they are already cash-strapped when it comes to the cap. They had a little bit more wiggle room than we thought going in because of a loophole in the salary cap, as it turns out. But do they try to go out and find themselves a veteran goalie and then make a corresponding move, or do they just see what Zadkov has as a backup to Marc-Andre Fleury?
Yeah, from what I've heard about Zadkov, he's never really been perceived as an eventual NHL backup. He's been a guy that's been kind of taking up space in Wilkes-Barre and providing some competitiveness for the Wilkes-Barre team so that other guys may develop. It's either go get a veteran or turn it over to the kid from Quinnipiac and see if you catch lightning in a bottle there.
Zadkov is seen as an AHL number one, but so is Eric Hartzell. You might be right about him having more potential in a situation like this, and that's probably the direction I would go. But it might force their hand in terms of trading Matt Niskanen to get some cap relief there, because you have Dupre playing, for a lower figure. So
you might have to send him down and trade Niskanen now. Potentially.
And then use Bortuzzo in England as your 5-6 pair. Boy, I hope not. I hope not. What could also happen is if Vokoun gets diagnosed as being out for the season, then his salary comes off the cap.
They could do that if he goes injury long term.
And then you can go out and get another goaltender. But one thing they don't want to do, for sure, is play Marc-Andre Fleury 60 games. That has proven in the past to be kind of productive. Although, really, with Marc-Andre Fleury, I think it's all a crapshoot at this point, no matter what you do with them.
That's Pittsburgh Sports Hub's Pittsburgh Sports Reporters for today. A very rosy picture on this Monday. Thanks for watching.
Can Beecham play goaltender?
What? He can play anywhere. Remember, he's a jack of all trades, master of apparently absolutely none.
Liverpool lost too.
Keeps getting better.